Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to the final session of the policy track, the Startup Nations policy track of Global Entrepreneurship Congress 2025. This is the art of implementing policy. Big challenge when translating big visions and entrepreneurial ambitions in governments into reality. My name is Matt Smith. I'm the Vice President of Global Entrepreneurship Network. I lead all of our policy and research activities, which includes the Startup Nations community of policymakers and the Global Entrepreneurship Research Network connecting academics. Delighted to have a very strong panel here today from two governments and one international organization to dig into the challenges and the realities of implementing policy within entrepreneurship. So I'm going to ask each of them to do a very brief introduction first and a brief introduction of their background. Then I'm going to start working my way through and posing a few questions. Very much want to come to the audience and get questions from all of you as well. So please, Oswald.
Hello, everybody. My name is Oswald Osaritin-Gobadia, managing partner for GEC. Most recently, I worked for the President of Nigeria, where I helped implement policy in the digital space. Currently now working with UNDP, the Timbuktu program for Africa, where we're trying to help create an enabling environment for startups and entrepreneurs and innovation. Thank you.
Arlette.
Yes, hello. My name is Arlette Verplug. I work at the UN Trade and Development, like you at the UN, and I'm leading the work on enterprise development, most of all in developing countries.
Thank you. And Gonzalo.
Hi, everyone. My name is Gonzalo Valenci, Executive Director of the Innovation Agency of the province of Córdoba in Argentina. We are in charge of developing the public policy in terms of innovation and startup ecosystem back in Córdoba and the promotion of job creation through innovation and entrepreneurship.
Fantastic. Thank you. So an excellent panel here. Now, the idea behind this session was that a lot of time and energy is spent talking about the best policy, how to design the best startup act, the best entrepreneur visa, the best tax break for entrepreneurs, etc. And a lot of energy goes into documenting those approaches. And there is many governments around the world that will look at other policies and try to copy and paste them into their own country. Very little is talked about in terms of implementing, and implementation is one of the most challenging aspects of getting policies off the ground to nurture entrepreneurship. And we're going to dig into that across each of our panelists. Now, Oswald, one of the main things you were responsible for in your role previously was the Nigerian Startup Act. Can you give us a brief introduction, or not necessarily brief, run through what that structure is and the journey of getting that to launch?
Brief, not brief? So the Nigerian Startup Act came from an ecosystem cry for, requiring certain provisions that will help provide the right enabling environment for their businesses. Having been an entrepreneur in Nigeria myself for close to 20 years, trying not to age myself, going into government, it was more so trying to get an understanding of what happens in government that makes the business environment difficult. Crossing the imaginary line into government, engagements with the private sector became, a plethora of issues that they believed or not believed were living under were problems in trying to execute their startup ideas. So that's where the act actually was birthed from. A number of different, I call it provisions now, but it was just problems, right? So a number of problems which became provisions in the document. So that's the idea of creating the Startup Act came from that. The act takes, every act is unique. Since doing the Nigerian Startup Act, I've looked at several countries on the continent. One of the key things is understanding why we're doing the act, right? What is the commonality of whys? Why are we doing this particular act? In Nigeria, we took the approach of creating a Startup Act. I've been to other countries, for instance, Matt and I have, we tend to go to Algeria a lot, where they took a different approach of not even bothering the act, but actually going into the provisions in different parts of the policy space and just changing right there. Tax is a problem, change the tax. Procurement with government is a problem, change it right there. We have issues with importation. Okay, we change it right there where importation sits. But I think that most countries like the idea of creating an act, one, because it's a political tool, it's a conversation gathering point where, it brings the private sector and the public sector together, which is the right way to do it, into a conversation about what is required to create that enabling environment. A Startup Act starts from the conversation, starts from the private sector stating what the issues are and government giving the interpretation of what that means in the solutions that can be preferred for the private sector. What tends to potentially happen with policymaking sometimes is that government may just see a problem and try to solve that problem without the private sector, which ends up being, scratching the wrong itch. And sometimes it creates this problem where is a government overreach, or it creates a problem where the government actually becomes competition to the private sector. So that's why it's important, and I think I spent most of this time just talking about why it's important for why the public sector and the private sector must get into a room and have that conversation to determine what the commonality of whys are in developing the policy. And post that is a long journey of going through all the regulatory processes of creating a policy in that country, which differs from country to country. So I'll stop there for now.
Thanks, Oswald. And just to dig into that, the structure that the Nigerian Startup Act has put together is really interesting in that, as you say, others design a Startup Act with an idea that it is removing foreign restrictions on foreign ownership of shares, it's digitizing company registrations, it's very explicit changes to make things easier. But the key with the Nigerian Startup Act was not that it was solving problems, but creating the framework for future problems to be solved. So could you talk through that process and the different stakeholders involved, and if an entrepreneur came up with a challenge, how that would flow through to be implemented as policy?
Yeah. So, when you think about solving problems in policy, you can essentially create, a 3,000-page document when you're trying to address every single particular issue. What we did in the Startup Act was a bit different and is being copied, sort of across the continent now. We created a sort of a engine that would solve future problems. And that was really done by creating collaboration within the document, as opposed to just what we always say is just creating a document through a collaborative process. Within the document is a setup that has both government and private sector, by law, having to meet to basically review issues within the ecosystem. So if, for instance, immigration wasn't put into the document, or a problem with immigration visas, which is actually a big problem on the continent, you're in Nigeria, but you want a programmer from Uganda, that visa and how that entrepreneur comes to the country could be an issue. So a problem like that would have to go through the Act, and the Act is positioned in a way where, is presented. It sounds very simple, but some of these things, just getting government and the private sector into a room is a very difficult feat in itself. So the Act actually mandates that government actually sits and listens to the private sector where that problem is presented and is able to make a decision that would drive a quick decision for this particular sector in itself. Now, what not happened post the Act being passed was trying to duplicate this same mechanism in other sectors, right? So this was just for digital economy, for startups. We could also just do that for the creative. We could also do that for other sectors. But the idea was to create a collaborative engine within the Startup Act that would solve future problems as they arise in the future.
And this must have been a really interesting challenge to get the government aligned on this, because you give the immigration example. One of the challenges in the UK and many other countries around the world, you have this friction within the government where the Department for Business or Ministry of Economy wants to bring in more entrepreneurs, more investors, more talent, and you have the Home Office, those in control of borders that are actively seeking to reduce numbers or make things harder. So how did the Act now kind of shares that responsibility across the government, and you have ministers from multiple ministries as part of that decision-making process. What was the journey to bring them in line and get them aligned on solving problems as one single government rather than individual ministries?
Bringing them in line is a continuum, right? Especially when government changes, right? But in the design of the act and reviewing other acts from other countries, you have to think politically what is important, right? If you place a startup act beneath the Minister of Digital Economy, which is what's happening across the continent now, it may not have the same impact as if you place the act under the president, for instance. So I think that really applies to whatever you believe in your country, you deem as important, right? If it's agriculture, I mean, whatever it is, right? So in the Startup Act, we looked at the startup ecosystem. When you look at the demographic of the continent or Nigeria in this particular case, we continue to say that we have 75% are under 20 or under 25. You would know that entrepreneurship is going to be a pretty big part of our economy going down in the future. Innovation is a big part of going in the future. So it became very important that we put the right priority on this particular ecosystem. And doing that meant we needed to place this act right beneath the president and make the people who are responding in the act be leaders of key ministries. So if they get together and we're presenting, for instance, once again, using the same example, immigration, it's quite possible that, the agency that immigration sits under is reporting to one of the ministers that are in the room. So that was done specifically to get that quick decision making. What would happen, and I've seen documents recently, just today was sent out, where the entire act sits under a minister, and then the minister now calls for agencies from other ministers. That makes it difficult for quick action. So some of these things, just strategic way you place in a document the provision, makes a difference on how problems can be solved expediently, and that's what we try to achieve there.
Thank you. And I think this is a good time to move on to our next speaker, Arlette, of UNCTAD. One of the roles of UNCTAD and the Enterprise Entrepreneurship Development team that you lead is helping governments design and write national entrepreneurship strategies. Can you tell me, maybe building on Oswald's point, what lessons are there and what do you see in where entrepreneurship is placed within a government, and how has that impacted the success of entrepreneurship strategies within countries?
Yes, thank you. It was really interesting to listen to your example. What we've been doing over the years is, based on our experience in working with many countries, we've developed a framework on entrepreneurship strategies, and this is what we're trying to apply in every country based on specific pillars where we walk through regulations, innovation, technology, education, access to finance, market access, really the different areas that are key for entrepreneurship. Now, of course, if we talk about entrepreneurship and you raise this issue, it's cross-cutting. You're talking about health, you're talking about agriculture, you're talking about innovation, technology, and so on. It's very difficult to get everybody around the table. This is why we believe it's very important from the outset to clearly link the entrepreneurship strategy to the national development plan. Like this, everybody can identify themselves, what is the bigger goal and how does entrepreneurship fit into this. Another very important element in it is to raise awareness with entrepreneurs and with the different ministries, that everybody understands what is their role in it, and that it's the review of the strategy that is being developed, that it is accepted worldwide, and that it has been also being able to have a buy-in. So what we promote a lot is consultations, many consultations. It takes time, it's true, you can't move that quick, but sometimes it's good also to take a little bit more time when you deal with a strategy that is larger than a specific target group of small entrepreneurs like startups to look at this issue. Now, as a last point, what we see as a difficulty is very much that there's not one thing as one entrepreneur. They're very different kind of entrepreneurs, different needs that all need to be addressed in regulations. And this is then a hard task that many governments face to try to deal with this, and how to properly find the bodies that can help these entrepreneurs and steps to move forward.
Thank you. And for governments that are kind of starting this journey and developing their national entrepreneurship strategy, what missteps have you are common? Where do you find that that they stumble when seeking to translate that paper, that document, into reality?
Building perhaps on what I said, and it can sound contradictory, but some governments continue having consultations. And of course, entrepreneurs, they need, as you say, a shorter period of time to register their businesses. They need clear rules how to move forward. They need to have easier access to funding. They're desperately looking at support on specific institutions that can help them. And so if a government walks along too long in the consultation process, this can in fact be counterproductive. So this is one thing that we see. Secondly, what we also see that sometimes regulations can be overlapping. We need to be careful that one does not contradict the other. So there needs to be really clarity on this. And one thing that we promote a lot is putting everything online. As long as documents are online, it's easier to find. It's easier also to find the overlapping and for entrepreneurs to have a clear path forward in which they can produce. So these are things we really see as obstacles in entrepreneurship.
Great, thank you. Gonzalo, we'll bring you in here. Keen to learn a little bit more about the activities, the programs, and how you are remaining responsive and reactive in managing your programs and managing your priorities as a government.
Well, first of all, we work as a sub-national government, so in the scale, it fits better for us. In creating incentives, sometimes we need to negotiate, or we depend on the national government. And I'm going to take what Oswald said about the public and private articulation. So the agency that I'm running, and the president is sitting right there, and the former director of the agency is here, so glad to have some fellows here, was born as a private and public initiative. So 2015, we went to Israel to explore how they did things, and we said we need to create a public and private agency with the approval of the private sector, with all the stakeholders involved, so we generate first trust and consensus about what Córdoba and then the country needs to create economic development through entrepreneurship and innovation. Second, as an agency, we work in a more agile way, so we have the opportunity to do some proof of concepts, pilot programs, and to pivot the policy. And that's what we try to do every time. So every time we launch a program, after it's finished its first year, we take a good look at it, and if it needs to be fixed, we fix it. And the policy, after 5 years, 3, 4, 5 years, then we take a deeper look and we say, look, we need to change it at all. This last thing happened to us, like all we do until now was for $1 that the public sector engages in the ecosystem, the private sector was forced to put $1. Otherwise, we could not invest either in startups, in open innovation projects, or in the ecosystem. And we were supporting incubators with half of the operational costs. And that ran for 6 years. After 6 years, we decided to stop. We ran a research report. And now with the data that we have got, now we're changing on how to move on with the next edition of that program, because we had the hypothesis that it has reached its ceiling. It couldn't grow over there. So that's what we do. And regarding what you said about, the time that the administrations have got, regulation and political issues, the agency is quite independent in terms of administrations. So we are still talking about what the past administration did in a good way. So we didn't get into this new administration and said, what we did, and we already been 2 years, so it would have been like, I wouldn't have material to share with you. So I'm talking about what the agency has done since it has been born. So that shows some consistency for the ecosystem, so startups can trust the agency, and we can be somehow useful for the ecosystem. And that's the outcomes that we're seeing right now. And afterwards, I can talk about the challenges, because we have more challenges than things that we have done already. But we try to be agile, and as we said back home, is we try to to everybody to see us as we're private sector, working as we're private sector and not public sector, with what that means back home in Latin America, right?
Thank you. And I actually want to bring the rest of the panel into conversation now and open this up. Arlette, Oswald, Gonzalo, you've all touched on kind of agile policymaking, the need to be responsive, the need to stop doing consultations and get on with things. Where are things working in terms of, what do I want to ask her? What works in terms of bringing entrepreneurs into government, and what are some of the pain points? You touched on this earlier, Oswald, but the pain points of bringing entrepreneurs and the entrepreneurial methodology into the policymaking process.
Would you like me to start? Okay. Some country examples we've seen, and I really liked it. Now, of course, every country is different, and there's, as I say, no one size fits all, but what we've seen is when policymakers come close to the entrepreneurs, and it depends also very much actually who takes the first step. I mean, you're saying you're acting like your private sector, so entrepreneurs already identify themselves with you. But what we're also seeing is just have sessions once every few months where a senior person from a ministry meets entrepreneurs, can be sectoral based, can be entrepreneurs in general, and where they can just explain what are the pain points they go through daily and so on. And it's surprising the kind of dialogue that then gets established. We often hear like public sector, they think differently, private sector thinks, we think differently and so on. But at the end, if there's a good communication, one can go very far in solving problems, adapting regulations or other that can help.
So, I mean, I think, well, I don't know if it's think or know now. There's a general lack of collaboration between public sector and private sector. Having gone from private sector to public sector, now back to private sector, who works with a lot of public sector, you definitely can sort of see the sort of the yo-yo effect. I tell people all the time, and I think I said in the last panel I spoke today, where I said, policymakers, their job is to protect, right? You protect the economy, you protect people, and you protect the environment, and it just goes on. Startups, founders, we encourage them to disrupt, shake things up, make it more effective, make it more efficiency, and so forth. Now, the issue lies where the founders, they disrupt, but the public sector people don't understand disruption, right? They see something has changed and something has been derailed, and the only tools they have is to rectify, to correct, not corrupt, that problem. So that will continue to go and continue if both parties are not collaborating and coordinating with each other. And that's why an organization like yours, makes a lot of sense. And that's the same reason why in the Startup Act, the very first thing we did, the very first paragraph, is creating that forced situation where they're engaging with each other. And that's what's also very interesting about the Timbuktu program, in a sense that, it's set up in a way where we're bringing founders together, put them in a hub, but then now saying, what are your policy problems, right? And then looking to say, okay, we're going to train you on how you can engage government to develop policy. At the same time, we're going to their government and saying, hey, we're going to train you how you're going to engage private sector people to co-create policy. Because that's where the problem lies, in the sense that government does not see whatever fancy disruption a startup wants to create. It's not in their purview. And then I also advise young founders always that, look, it's critical that you understand the policies and regulations that guide the business that you're in. You will find when you discuss with young business people, they're just like, government, I could just continue to do my business. And essentially what I've now discovered in my yo-yo back and forth is that if we don't invest properly in there's a lot of investors. We invest in startups, but not too much of the investment is going into the environment, into the foundation, into the soil, which is the policy framework. And essentially, in situations where we're not investing enough into the soil, then the crop is never the right yield. So you may have this startup who was supposed to make 100 million, is actually just making 50, but everybody's happy because it's still a lot. But it really was supposed to make 100 million. So this is where it's important that that collaboration, that coordination between the public sector and private sector must happen. And organizations like yours, forces it to happen. Organizations like Timbuktu and Unix EdTaid also do the same thing.
Well, I'm going to take like a couple of minutes because I want to frame Cordoba because we're not Argentina. We are the second province of Argentina. 3.9 million people live in Cordoba. We have 427 cities in Cordoba. The capital city holds around 1.5 million, but it only represents 33% of the GDP of the province, meaning we have a diverse territory of production in Cordoba. We have 12 universities, 300,000 students, so it's an attractive pole for people to come to study. 30% of students come from different cities of Argentina. That means that we have diversity, and diversity fosters innovation, and we have companies that need talent. We were born as an agency in that context. So a context of a strong and push private sector and a strong academic sector. So what we tried to do was always work on which were the market flaws in terms of startups and innovation. So we could have developed probably the best policy in terms of creating awareness or training more companies. But as you said, if they needed to create their business and it took them 6 months, it wouldn't make any sense. So Cordoba has got a policy that in 10 days, up to 10 days, you can create your own company. Then there's a strong policy about, look, we cannot ask people to move from the cities to start a business. I mean, if they want to move, they can move, but we cannot force them, meaning we need to give the resources to everybody in the infrastructure to everybody in the province so they can start their own business. So there's a strong connectivity plan and infrastructure, so they, pretty much every place in the state has got internet access. So with that being said, we try to leverage all the startups that, are already born or are starting to born, and there's an others government program that works with more traditional entrepreneurs. So we focus on startups, and we try to push over startups that go near the frontier of innovation. So we invest in startups with the private sector, and what we try to do is to keep those pain points to the minimum. We have a few. Probably the main one is the lack of capital to support the startups in all their journey. But we have startups that go from the beginning, from raising angel investment and friends, families, and funds investment, we're going to say fools, to VCs and late stage capital. And they're a hit of success in Cordoba. So we've mapped out more than 400 innovative startups. And through our incubator program, we have helped over 1,000 entrepreneurs to emerge and to settle there. Probably a tipping point would be on the other way. Just don't rely as much on the state. Just, because we have a saying, we give the hand and some of them just, pretty much hug us. Okay, so on the other side that maybe don't work with the government, it's once you start giving them opportunities, sometimes it's tough to move those opportunities to somewhere else because a sector grew and you need to move on to another sector that needs to grow. And those acquire rights, and it happens in life, it's I got this acquire right. But as a policymaker, that's a challenge. And if you don't do that correctly, then your ecosystem can start failing. People stop trusting you and all the consensus you generated, you can lose it at all.
Thank you. And did you want to respond to that at all?
I mean, one of the great things about this conference so far is that we're discovering that the issues are all the same, right? Yeah. And that's brilliant. I think what you just described was the rise of the grantpreneurs, right? You run into these founders who are perfectly positioned to just keep getting grants. And they keep getting grants and the business never grows. So thanks for pointing that out.
I wanted to pick up, obviously, as a subnational government in Argentina, there can be a lot of trickiness navigating the kind of federal policy and how state-level policies complement or overlap perhaps with these policies. Can you talk through what challenges you may have been facing in trying to map, align, and I guess complement your activities and the policies you're undertaking to support entrepreneurs with what is or is not there at the national level?
That's a great question, and the timing is perfect because, unfortunately, people in the United States, since the beginning of Trump's administration, have seen how volatile can the world become when a decision is about to be made or announced. That's how we've been living in Argentina for the past 10 to 15 years, meaning one small change in lawmaking can enhance an industry. Let's say imports are closed, meaning a whole new bunch of companies can be born that replace imports. So you actually develop a paradigm where that happens. But then all of a sudden a new administration comes and says, look, imports are open, but you have developed a whole industry, a whole supply chain, a whole technology based on talent, but on being cheap, and that all of a sudden starts to crumble. So living that way stress you a little bit, but also give you some resilience in terms, look, we need to have as much as flexible policy making as we can, so we cannot sit only on one article of a law saying this, because if that piece of law is, it's forbidden, then our whole structure fails. So, depending the government, we were, more connected in terms, look, maybe bigger funds, federal government, seed stage money, state government. Now the government has another mission. It's not involved in economic development in terms of microeconomy. So what we try to do is not depend on the national government. That's pretty much happening to all of the provinces in Argentina, because they have created a strong connection, like an umbilical cordon they cannot cut. Luckily, Cordoba cut it many years ago. So we are pretty much, there's a saying that if we have access to the sea, we would have become independent, but it's not going to happen. But what we try to do is to depend as less as possible on the national government. And now, actually, the new times that are coming are even better for startups. It's a much more friendly environment for investors to come. Investors are seeing Argentina again. Oh, look, there's a possibility for foreign talent to come to Argentina and talent from Argentina to grow without the necessity to leave in order to access money. So that would be a choice and not to be mandatory.
Thank you. And Oswald, well, Gonzalo has been talking about kind of the subnational, the kind of region taking the lead. One of the follow-up actions with the Nigeria Startup Act over the last year or two has been taking that model out into the states across Nigeria. While you haven't been kind of leading on this, can you talk through what that journey has been and how it's now being replicated and adopted across Nigeria?
Yeah, so thank you. That's been birthed from the idea that, there is no business that exists within a national government. All the impact you get on your business happens at the local level, right? So in Nigeria as a federation, we have states. And it was important to now replicate the value add, or actually even the rest of the value, because you couldn't really do all the real value in the federal act. You have to do it at the state level. So to now create those values in the provisions from a state to state level. So right now, over 10 states are looking at it. 3 of them have already passed as acts, and is a continuous project, and we tend to support as a consultancy and try to help the states, with a template bill and try to guide as much as we can. But it's just looking at getting the states to understand, and that's sort of what they're doing in Argentina as well. That that they can actually make their states attractive for startups, right? And could they have a competition within the country for startups, or actually be attractive to founders from other parts of Africa or the world by creating the right policies. And one of the things I tend to say to state governments is, if you look into America, a developed economy, you have to ask yourself, what's the difference between California, New York, Miami, Texas, and why do founders go to any of these states? You're not going to say it's technology infrastructure, because that's pretty much the same in all these different states. You're not going to say it's access to resources, which is pretty much the same in all these states. But in emerging countries, technology and infrastructure can be a differentiating factor. Access to resources and resources being available for your business can be a differentiating factor. But in America, it's more so the policy differences, right? Your business moving from California to San Antonio or Austin is based on what that state is offering your business, and it's why you move. So with that kind of example, people tend to understand the impact of policy making and how policy can make the difference in making your environment more attractive for a place to do business. So the states are taking heed to that, and they are not only doing all aspects of, in fact, policy is now seen as infrastructure, it's foundational, but also trying to make their states more attractive through developing infrastructure, developing programs to create more resources within their states. But they now see policy as an important aspect of it as well, and definitely doing the act.
Thanks. And I see one of the most kind of exciting examples of that being India, and the sheer scale of competition between all of those states, all competing to be top of the rankings, strength of ecosystem, how many unicorns they have, etc. And as you say, the policy is foundational to that. It's and it's, I guess, the interesting element there is it's not just the policies, it's the programs, it's the infrastructural investments, it's the science parks. So it comes back to the importance of iterating, improving, evaluating the initiatives. Gonzalo touched briefly on this, but I wanted to come back and talk more about the importance of evaluation and tracking, and how you use that to continue to refine the policymaking process. So Arlette, maybe that's something you'd like to talk about, and I think you have something else as well.
Yeah, if you allow me very quickly to respond, because I like what you were saying, in the sense that I think since COVID we can say that the new normal is every day is different for entrepreneurs, and agility, resilience is key, whatever level of entrepreneurship you have. And here business development services can play a great role, where they can help build this resilience. What does it mean for entrepreneurs? What is their mindset that they need to think of? Today I have a network, or I set up my business in a certain way. Tomorrow reality is completely different. Markets, the partners you've been working with for years, the border is closed or what have you. So here, building that capacity and that mindset is very important for entrepreneurs to move forward. And this is something in the implementation of strategies, which is really more at the ground level, is very important. So on the monitoring and so on, it's, data. We come back to data. Being able to see which sectors flourish well, at what level do entrepreneurs when are they blocked, what happens, and so on. So these are the kind of elements to have this continuation of discussion with entrepreneurs, and to see what kind of services they further need without strict policies. I agree that can also kill innovation, but to really set in place a mechanism where this continuous feedback on the kind of policies and regulations that work, the kind of entities that exist that can provide support, and how they can be best adapted also to today's world of sustainability, digitalization, now AI. Everybody says it's very disruptive, but when we speak with entrepreneurs, we always get to hear, yes, AI is important, but what can I do in my business with it? I don't know. So these kind of things are very important to mention. And another thing is with regard to investors. Investors are becoming more and more also savvy about AI, but many don't yet. And we've seen in countries that can hinder as well digitalization, and even put it back for years. If investors don't understand, they will not accept or invest in business proposals that have AI or technologies that are advanced. So this is also a role where business development service providers or others can play an educational role in bringing everybody forward where a country, where the government wants the economy to go.
Thank you. And we're close to ends, but wanted to open it up for questions for our distinguished panel about the challenges of implementation, if there are any questions from the floor. Sushil.
Yeah, thank you, Matt, and thank you to the panelists. I think, the key issues. Yeah, sure. I think you were able to articulate some of the key issues that we also find with a number of countries when they are developing and implementing policy. Of course, the coordination element is key in terms of how policies can be successfully implemented. But the question that I sort of wanted to raise is three issues. One is, I think you didn't touch on the issue about institutional capacity of governments and agencies in implementing some of those policies, including the issue around monitoring and evaluation. They don't have that capacity. And therefore, we see a very weak kind of monitoring and evaluation. The second issue I wanted to raise, and probably this is a question to the panelists, the informal sector. Now, in most of the developing countries, there is a vast number, entrepreneurial activity happens in the informal sector. Now, policies don't reach them, and it doesn't make a difference to them. And also, they're not able to access some of the services and support mechanisms that may be there. And of course, people are saying that the solution is formalize it. And the moment they get formalized, they're dead. So how do you address that? Particularly, this is the case in a number of developing countries. And the last question, and this is kind of moving forward, rethinking. I think in some of the discussion, people did talk about policy innovation. Here we are talking about being entrepreneurial. Can there be any scope of being, policymakers being entrepreneurial in the policy process? And also, I think people also raised about an issue around experimenting. How do we do policy experimenting, or whether there needs to be a change in the mindset? Thank you.
Thank you, Sushil. That was comprehensive. And I think we're rapidly running out of time, so I may invite each of the panelists to perhaps do a quick wrap-up, perhaps touching on some of these points before I kind of close and make a few recommendations. Gonzalo.
Yeah, so before I forget what after he was saying, but so on the first part about the institutional capabilities, 100% correct. There's lack of the right people working in the government. The best people usually in undeveloped countries don't work at the government, so it doesn't pay much. What we try to do there is to partner with universities or to partner with some research institutions that do have the capability, and with our input, they can actually, conduct the work that would pretty much the same as if we would have done it with. It's like, having an in-house software department or hiring a third-party software company. So that's how we try to leverage the lack of capabilities sometimes we have got, mainly in evaluating the impact of the programs. We have strong capacity on implementing policy, on designing it, but evaluating takes another level, another kind of people. So that's what we do there. And in terms of informality, it's completely true. It's completely true. We struggle in Argentina and in Córdoba with that. What we try to do is we have a couple of incentives of promotion laws, regimes, that exempts startups to paying taxes for, let's say, 10 years in a state reach, so they don't fear to become formal, And we subsidize every new employee they hire. We subsidize, let's say, 50% of the salary for 6 or 12 months. So that way, that gives them time in order to grow their business without spending the money on taxes, and helping them, look, you can be on the formal side of the ecosystem, and that also gives us better metrics to measure the impact in a more realistic way. So,
Gonzalo, I think we'll have to wrap up there.
And that would be it, yeah.
Arlette.
Okay, perhaps as the UN, I'll most of all address the second point you mentioned about informality, which is very important to us. Here we see informality in the terms of necessity, entrepreneurs out of necessity. The moment they have an opportunity elsewhere, likely they close down the shop that they have. They don't really contribute to an economy. So that is one part. The other part is out of opportunity. So how can you engage these entrepreneurs that they want to become part of the formal sector? So here we put a lot of hope on AI. Informality starts already with not being recognized by society, so not having a bank account, and that often is due to the fact that there's no bookkeeping, accounting. With AI, soon on phones, everything is easily doable by speaking even in your own dialect language and keep your booking up to date, hence being able to go to a bank and then become a more visible entrepreneur. And then with schemes like tax and so on, where governments can help these entrepreneurs being pushed in the formal sector. And out of time, I'll stop there.
Thanks. Oswald.
Yes, it's a true point about the capacity issue. I remember when I first saw the act being interpreted by public sector, I was shocked as what they thought they were reading. That was my first shock when it came time to implement the actual act. But I would say that lack of capacity can be solved through a lot of collaboration and coordination. Global problem, but understanding the private sector needs to understand that they need to partner with the public sector to ensure that the areas of concern or the areas that they're doing business in is protected, right? That entire absent-mindedness or staying away from government is a big part of the problem. And then I also try to, speak to the notion that there are people who are not being affected by policy. I think everybody who is commercial is affected by policy. So if you're informal and you're in the market, okay, let me just change currency policy, for instance, and you're going to feel it, or taxation policy, or any policy, change VAT, you'll feel it. So policy affects every single aspect of our life, and it's important that everybody is involved.
Great, thank you. So an excellent three questions there, and I think as clear, there's a lot more to discuss on this. On the Startup Nations policy community within GEN, we obviously have done a lot of work documenting policies around the world with our GEN Atlas. And this is the first of many conversations where we start to delve into the implementation, the challenges, and the experiences of policymakers. So I'd like to thank my panelists for joining me. Thank you for joining us for this. If you'd like to learn more about the Startup Nations policy community, you can find that information on the website. I wish you a successful rest of Congress. Thank you.